Hello, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society webinar series. We're excited to bring you today's session, Best Practices Forum for Industry 4.0. My name is Courtney McWhirter. I will be your host for today. I am the Marketing Communications Manager at Digital Enterprise Society. If you have any questions about membership or the organization at all, or how to get involved, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help. Digital Enterprise Society is a new nonprofit member association organized to enable the transformation of product development, design, delivery, and maintenance throughout the digital enterprise, regardless of software tools used. We'd like to invite all of you, if you're not already a member of Digital Enterprise Society, to join us. You can join for free using the promo code at the bottom of your screen, Webinar 2020. Before we get started, I'd like to share a couple updates. We'd like to invite you to join us for an upcoming online course, Agile Leadership for Digital Transformation, beginning October 5th. We've partnered with the Agile Strategy Lab to bring you this customized course based on their award-winning book, Strategic Doing, 10 Skills for Agile Leadership. The course will focus on these 10 skills and how they can be leveraged to meet the challenges of digital transformation. I'll put a link for you in the chat for where you can learn more and register for that course. And finally, I also want to share, before I hand it over to Mo, and invite you to listen to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Mo, James, and Isaac have all been guests on the podcast. You can find it on Apple, Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify, and a couple of your other favorite podcast streaming platforms. And now I will turn it over to Mo.
Yeah, Courtney, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks for the Digital Enterprise Society for hosting our session today. I'm very thankful to Chris, James, and Isaac for being here today on the panel. In short, IoTco is the Internet of Things company. Our DNA is the automotive industry. We provide digital transformation technologies and services to automotive and discrete manufacturing, including Industry 4.0 technologies like industrial artificial intelligence and predictive analytics. So if we go to the next one, please. I'm very, again, proud to have a veteran, seasoned panelist team here today. And we're going to really be talking about Industry 4.0. We want to talk about the fourth industrial revolution and how it's impacting manufacturing, how it's impacting industry, also given the challenges that the world is going through today, which is obviously impacting the manufacturing sector. And as part of the strategy conversation we want to have today, we want to really talk about four things. We want to talk about the business case, the return on investment, and what motivates manufacturers to use Industry 4.0 technology. We want to talk about how they can get connected, how they can collect real-time data from the factory floor. We're going to talk about analytics, how they can use the data to drive meaningful improvements to their maintenance and to their quality within their plants, and some conversations around technology as well. With the next slide, I just wanted to paint the picture of the business case, and it's something we want to talk about today. Obviously, manufacturers are all about improving profits and reducing losses and working with tight margins. And there are metrics like overall equipment effectiveness that help them improve the way they do business today. And using tools like real-time data collection and predictive analytics and predicting maintenance issues, predicting quality issues, it's all about impacting the P&L of the manufacturer and help them improve significantly their operations. So keeping this in mind, it's food for thought. I'm again very pleased to introduce our panelist team today, and I'll have them each introduce themselves, and then we'll be glad to start having a conversation around Industry 4.0. So with this, Chris, if you could be so kind to introduce yourself, Mr. Charlton.
Thanks, Mo. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be part of this. I think the IoT initiative is critical for the future of America, but also the world. I think it will ensure competitiveness. And for someone like me, if someone said you can predict a certain stock on the stock market or how the stock market's going to trend, I would buy it all day long because I realized the return would be fantastic. And most recently, I've been in the business for a long time. In 2019, we did billions and billions in the market in automotive. We're automotive and industrial segment. We're also in energy. We have oil and gas wells in the Permian, Delaware basins in Texas. We have 2.8 billion tons of iron ore, I think more than anybody in the country. And we're always looking to improve because I've always believed the minute you stop improving, the minute you stop going forward, you're not sitting still, you're going backwards. And especially in today's world, it is so small that the competition is fierce. And then in some cases, you've got countries where the government owns or controls the businesses, and that's an amazing amount of support. And it's hard to compete in those markets. So we're looking for advantages. Most recently, I bought Dura Automotive, as I think people know, only because I took it out of bankruptcy for the North American and Chinese operations. Otherwise, we would own it and nobody would know, like most of our companies. So we've got about 30 different entities right now. We've just made major investment in another company that is a company that produces LiDAR systems, and it's part of the IoT concept. It helps protect the passengers. It helps protect the customers. And what IoT does to me, it gives me a return on my investment. It allows me to have a smart factory to protect my people. Also, I'm really interested in providing great value. I don't ever want to have a quality issue. And with the predictive analytics of IoTco, we're doing just that. I also am chairman and an owner of Mobex, which does castings and machinings. We make knuckles and control arms and things like that. And so for me to be a part of this, I'm absolutely delighted, and I appreciate being part of this panel.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. Pleased to also introduce Isaac Bennett, the CDO at Wright and McGill. Isaac, welcome.
Hey, Mo. It's always good to see you. It's good to see James, and good to meet Chris. Yeah, my background is IT. I've been in IT for around 20 years. And then, having that background in IT, I was able to lead a couple organizations with some digital transformation initiatives. One being Maxi on Wheels, who is the biggest rim manufacturer in the world in the automotive industry. I've just recently worked at Detroit Manufacturing Systems, which is a great company in Detroit, trying to bring manufacturing back to the city of Detroit. And now I'm with Wright and McGill, which is interesting. Wright and McGill, if anyone's ever gone fishing, they probably use an Eagle Claw hook. Wright and McGill is realizing that they need some digital transformation in their company. They have some hook machines that were manufactured in the 40s, I believe. So some very old machines that they need to smarten up. And it's one of those things. It's interesting with the pandemic going on. More and more people are going fishing. So Wright and McGill is trying to take advantage of this. They're selling more hooks than they ever have. So it's a really interesting time in the industry, especially in consumer goods, because I think there's a lot of obstacles nowadays with the environment of this pandemic, especially. So pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the panel and answering some questions. Thanks, Mo.
Thanks for being here, Isaac. And James Ricci, good to have you back, James.
Thanks, Mo. And it's good to be on the panel here. Looking forward to hearing some of the things both Chris and Isaac have to say. Just a little on my background. I am actually an advisor to the IoT company. I also own my own business. that is principally focused on manufacturing consulting. So my whole career was kind of around manufacturing and operations, whether working in it, managing operations, or in fact consulting for them as well. And I thought Chris made a good point right away when he stated this concept of, you know, manufacturing needing to be competitive, not just here in North America, but really globally. And that's sort of what gets me out of bed. I think what you'll hear from me a little bit is through this panel is kind of trying to give a good eye for what a mid-sized manufacturer probably thinks about this whole concept of Industry 4.0. It's a little different if you're General Motors versus, let's say, a tier 2 supplier that ultimately puts something on a car, on a vehicle that goes to General Motors. So I try to work with those directly with those type of companies to kind of help them with Industry 4.0 transitions. I will work with the banks. I will work with trade associations, universities, anybody who is focused on trying to make manufacturing more competitive. That's kind of what I try to do. So I really think that this transition is going to be in the forefront for all of us, you know, to kind of keep manufacturing relevant and competitive. So if we can share some best practices, people want to shoot some questions our way from what we're seeing, any way we can help, I'm here to help.
Thank you, James. And I do echo what James said. You know, I have a few questions for our panelist friends here today, but if anybody on the call has any questions, you know, please put them through the chat window and we're happy to address them at the right time during the session today. But let me take the title of the session and maybe immediately request the team here to provide their thoughts and their experience. I mean, there's a lot of options out there for Industry 4.0. There's a lot of vendors out there. There's a lot of technologies out there, AI, machine learning, additive, you name it. So maybe, you know, starting with Chris, what does Industry 4.0 mean to you? And any advice of when companies should start implementing IoT and Industry 4.0 in their plans?
You know, Mo, it's interesting when I was listening to James and Isaac, and I really appreciate hearing what they're saying. For me, when I started in the 80s in Japan, Japan has limited ground, limited space, and in the United States, our OEMs would take a facility and start tabula rasa, clean slate, take everything out of it, put all new equipment in it. The Japanese were different. They had old equipment, they had limited space, they had to continually improve the efficiency of that operation because they just couldn't build a plant next door. In some cases, they're sharing a wall with the factory next door. And so to optimize what they had, they really improved everything. They automated, nothing was too small. So when I took my son to Japan in his early teens, he might have been 13, might have been 12, he was shocked to see when the Japanese operator in his white outfit would turn and the robotic arm would hand a component for the assembly. When in the States, our guys didn't wear uniforms. Our facilities were not at that time as clean or efficient. And we had shiny new equipment, but it really wasn't a return on the investment that I would want as an owner. So what the Japanese taught me was you don't have to throw money at problems. You make your efficiencies as you go. And, you know, we kept looking at model changeovers in the United States before we implemented better designs, lower cost, things that the customer would value. In Japan, they continued making changes throughout the entire model years. And so for me, when you have something that can improve your business, when you have something that can give you a return or enhance your return, I think you do it step by step. I think you start in the troubled areas. Where am I losing money? Where am I having quality problems? Where might I have a piece of equipment that's going down and now I have to air ship? Because the air shipment costs money and the customer is not happy. And I don't want any negativity with my customer.
True.
And so my feeling is it's a step-by-step process, but it's something you have to begin. Because let me say this as well. When I say that my equipment now has, artificial intelligence with predictable determinants on the life of the part, how long, when we're going to have a quality issue, that's a selling point for me. Because, quality is long remembered after price is forgotten. And if that quality is there, the customer has the confidence, they will actually, the customers are really super bright. They're not buying just to get the cheapest part. They are really looking at a quality product and the sustainability of a relationship with that supplier.
True.
So I would say start now, start in the troubled areas, and build your server, your back office, so it's able to handle a smart facility. Do one facility to start with, get your lessons learned, take that profound knowledge and spread it through the entire facility. And an example with Dura, we've got 29 plants around the world, literally on every continent. Well, guess what? We now want to spread it to every one of those plants. And so that's my response.
I appreciate your feedback, Chris. That's actually a wonderful response. And I know, James, you also come from a Japanese automotive background. I believe you've worked in Honda in the past. What are your thoughts about Industry 4.0 and Chris's feedback?
Yeah, it's I brought back memories or nightmares, depending on the case may be, from when Chris was mentioning that. Yeah, I did do model changeovers at Honda, and when I came up to Detroit, there was a big difference. It's like, oh, I have months to make this change versus like there's a 2-car gap before the next model rolls down the line. You have to think about your job as an engineer a little differently under those 2 different scenarios. But when I think about, to kind of build off of what Chris was saying, he didn't talk about it like it was an implementation. This is a transition. You're never done. So we're not going to implement Industry 4.0, check the box, and kind of move on. This is really kind of an evolution. So if you think about Industry 3.0, way back, that was computers and robots. And I'm sure people at the beginning were like, how the heck are these robots and these computers going to actually change my business? Should I really be thinking about this? And now you would look back and go, well, that was a pretty stupid question, right? I think we're at that stage now with Industry 4.0 where it's like AI, machine learning. Are we really going to need that for manufacturing? Like this additive manufacturing thing, is it ever going to be any more than a niche? And I think if you step back and go, what is smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0 at its core? It's about better communication, whether between people or machines. It's about better monitoring, better diagnoses of your equipment and of your business, so you can learn and adapt. It's better data. It's better data that's real time. So all of those things are very generic to a business that would say, yeah, I want all of those things, because what is it going to do? It's just going to make me a better business. It's going to allow me to make better business decisions, so that, to Chris's point, quality is not going to be a problem. I'm not, air shipping and doing all these things that are negative to my business. So from my perspective, this concept of we have to begin this transition to this new world, take advantage of these new technologies. And, I'm sure we'll talk about it. I wouldn't let COVID go to waste. It's a great opportunity to kind of jumpstart some of this stuff.
And Isaac, before you tap in with your response, I also want to bring in a question that came from the audience, which maybe you can also address. Some seem to think that we're using IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things, and Industry 4.0 as interchangeable words, right? So what's your view on Industry 4.0, and do you think IIoT is Industry 4.0, or are they different things?
It's a kind of a subset, right? Because I think Industry 4.0 is a very, very big picture kind of item, including things like augmented reality, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, I mean, things like that, that I think go a little bit outside of just the IoT devices. So it's really the big, huge picture. But and James mentioned it. It's outside of the technology as well. It's a big thing that I talk about all the time. In the IT industry, it's a big deal. Is that, you need to know your people and your processes before you can just slap down the technology. So it's really important because at the core, for me, Industry 4.0 is about data and how you use that data. And part of that is connectivity, right? Because you need to connect the dots together, the missing information, the things you don't know. You want to be able to try to understand in your business the issues that you aren't aware of, or the connectivity between one issue and another issue at the start of the line or at the end of the line. How can you connect that together? And it's all about being able to get data off of those particular devices to really get meaning from them. But and I wrote down the note here that worlds are colliding. From an IT perspective, technology in general, you have to stay up to date, right? Because technology changes fast, and it adjusts quickly. And I think that is happening in the world in general. We're seeing it in this time, and with the pandemic, with COVID, that people had to adjust really quickly. We're now doing conferences over video, right? When a lot of people, are just getting used to the concept of using video conferencing systems. And I think that's what the auto industry is in manufacturing is feeling in general, is the fact that people are expecting be able to move quickly, and traditionally the auto industry wasn't that way. I mean, what was Ford's famous line was, you can have any color as long as it's black, right? So it's it's the new generation. They expect things quicker, they expect changes, they expect the latest technology, and I think manufacturing is having to change. And then what's enabling Industry 4.0 is the fact that those devices are getting cheaper and cheaper. So, I mentioned that we have machines from the 1940s that we're still making fish hooks with. Well, Industry 4.0 is enabling us, we don't have to go and change that machine. We can take IoT devices, hook them up, pull the data off of that, and then try to find value from those machines. So yeah, that's basically to me, that's what Industry 4.0 is, the technology is colliding with manufacturing, really.
Thank you, Isaac, for the feedback. And I would pick up on your conversation regarding technology and also what James alluded to, and maybe ask Chris, as a long-term business person and the work at Dura, Mobex, and many others. A lot of manufacturers today, Chris, are finding it very difficult to justify the investment. What's your advice about justifying the economic business case for Industry 4.0? How can they go about calculating and justifying the actual investment to make it happen?
Was that for James?
That was for Chris. I think Chris froze up for a second.
Okay.
Well,
Me?
up there.
Now you can hear me, Mo?
Yes, sir. You're back.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I'll give you a great example. We're in the process of acquiring another company, and it'll take Charlton to over.
I think you're cut out again, Chris. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll jump in for a second now until
Sure.
Chris kind of gets back in. The pat answer, right, is if it's tied to your business plan, then it shouldn't really, the ROI should really sort of fund itself.
Can you hear?
Yep. but the reality
I
is it doesn't
apologize.
always work out that way.
Someone else.
So, oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, geez.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Sorry, Chris, we lost you for a minute.
I think I was muted and then I wasn't muted, but so and for the stalking horse, prior to finalizing it, one of the machines goes down and BMW is really upset.
Sorry, we're losing Chris a little bit. He's going to try to redial in, and James, maybe you can take on the business case questions.
Yeah, I'll build a little bit off of what I think he's saying, which was this concept of he's saying something about BMW and there's an issue, right? So if you look at that, you know, yeah, real world, you've got a business plan and you lay out Industry 4.0 as part of that because you have a set of business objectives, and these tools, a lot of which Isaac talked about, the broader tools, all sort of support it. So yeah, so it needs to drive revenue, it needs to reduce cost, it needs to drive improved customer service. And you know, when you're first doing these, and there's a million things that you can focus in on, the first one for me, the ROI should be fairly easy because you're going after something that, you know, is an issue. You know, it's a known issue that you feel like a combination of technology and process change can overcome. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to implement and get, but generating the ROI is like, this is the big pain point for us. We've got lots of downtime, lots of quality issues, lots of unscheduled overtime, lots of premium freight. Usually there's a lot there. I think the bar for an ROI tends to change as you implement the technologies because you become more aware of what the benefits are going to be, and it moves away from being an event to more of a continued reinvestment back in the business. But without a doubt, it's got, I mean, I kind of dismissed it, but it's got to be tied to your business plan. And then you're going to be able to find the budget, and you're going to be able to find the justification for it because it's tied directly into what you're trying to get accomplished as a business. It's not an extra credit assignment. It's not an IT project. It's not any of those things.
Thanks for picking that up, James. And while waiting to go back to Chris, maybe Isaac, you know, how did you set up the business case at Maxion Wheels to justify your Industry 4.0 investment, or Detroit Manufacturing Systems, or even your current organization at Eagle Claw?
Yeah, the justification, I mean, it can be a little bit overwhelming, as I said before, of thinking of Industry 4.0 and what you can do. And yeah, we over time, and we talked about it, and there's, you know, people talk about the low hanging fruit kind of concept. And that's a good way to start. You know, James mentioned it. I mean, there's probably a ton of low hanging fruit that you can find and grasp, but then how do you execute that, right? And how do you make it a project that doesn't turn into a big science project type scenario? And yeah, so we really specifically, and we actually consulted with Gartner, and I don't know if people know, you know, are aware of Gartner, but they're probably the biggest, you know, consulting group in IT, for an IT organization. And they have, special consultants that talk about Industry 4.0, and they kind of steered us in the direction of saying, yes, Industry 4.0 is a big, huge picture. It can be overwhelming, but let's focus on one specific problem. And then, so we went to the Akron facility, who had a specific machine that was kind of a bottleneck. If it broke down, it would cause problems. When you narrow down on that specific machine, we then actually said, okay, what is the problem with that specific machine? So it's not just the entire machine, it's the top tooling and lower tooling of the specific machine that causes the machine to fail. So we really narrowed it down to one specific problem, but keeping it in mind, the vision in mind, that there's other machines in that plant and there's other machines in that company that are similar. So it was a project that we were able to very narrow down to a specific part of a specific machine, and then does it have sensors? Sensor it up. And then from an IT perspective, what is also a big enabler of Industry 4.0 is being able to, if we don't have the infrastructure to start sending data and collecting data and doing some machine learning analysis, we are able to send that, spin up a machine in the cloud and in a rather 10, 15 minutes, prep that machine, be able to get that data from that plant floor, top tooling and lower tooling sensors that we put on it, send that to the cloud, and almost immediately start doing some data science analytics on that data and start modeling that specific machine to see when it will fail and when it won't fail. So you can take on this a big concept, Industry 4.0. It can scare you, but we were able to set up this project and actually start getting results in a matter of a couple months. And in some cases, a few weeks, you could do that, depending on how fast you can move. And we got, it was very, very helpful. We predicted the machine would fail in 10 days, and it failed in 10 days. It's kind of one of those things they wanted to see if it worked. And in 10 days, the machine fails. So we proved it out rather quickly. So the concept really is start small, keep that big picture in mind. And then once you prove the value, you also, I have to say, don't be afraid to fail. Innovation is all about failing. So don't be afraid to fail. Start with something small. Think about the big picture. And then if you have success, scale fast and be able to implement that quickly. I mean, that's where you are going to get the best ROI. So.
That surely well coincides back with Chris's early comment about thinking big, starting small, acting now. And failing, as you said, failing fast. Don't be afraid to fail. And Chris, I want to hand it back to you regarding the business case conversation. And you were about to give an example of an acquisition and how you justify the business case. So welcome back.
Thanks. I apologize. My wife told me I hadn't finished vacuuming one side of the room, and when the vacuum went on, the equipment went out. So, but I'm back now. With BMW, Charlton has one of the former leading experts that worked at BMW for 35 years, a gentleman who was a head of all engineering and research. And what I said to him this morning early, kind of a panic mode, if you will, but I said, let them know we will have that predictive technology implemented on this equipment, and that will be the first piece of equipment that we put it on. And I think that's the only thing that will give BMW the confidence going forward, since it is going to have a bit of a line shutdown right now, believe it or not. And that's kind of what we want. So in terms of the returns, it's predictive. We know we quoted it at a certain level. It takes away the variances. We know our equipment's going to work. As long as the volumes are sustainable, we know what our return on investment will be. I don't like surprises, especially surprises where my equipment went down, I'm shorting somebody, I'm 80,000 pieces behind to General Motors or to Renault Nissan. I can't handle having my reputation tarnished in any way, shape, or form. And so this really makes life a lot easier, a lot simpler. And I'll tell you one thing, the investment in predictive analysis is, to me, an investment in a great stock that's going to grow.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll take the word surprises. You know, speaking of surprises, James, sometimes we're able to justify the investment and the business case is there. And as Chris and Isaac said, think big, start small, start at the right place. But at some point, there is a surprise. It doesn't work. And there is a people side to it. There is culture. There is change management. There is issues actually making things happen once the technology is in place. So how do you feel the people side of things weighs in, and what's your advice to organizations to mitigate the people side of things and to get the business case right?
Yeah, there's and Isaac could probably speak to this even more than I could, the IT implementation failures, whether it's an ERP system, an MRP system, it's littered within manufacturing. And I think it's that piece that you talked about, which is understanding the people and the process change. I mean, again, I jokingly talked about Industry 3.0 a while back and said, like, about computers and robots. It's like, oh, are these things really going to be a thing? But now imagine where you're going to go ahead and talk about a new technology. We're going to use these computers, but we're not going to change any of our processes that we use to run our business. But we've got computers. Well, clearly that was never going to work. And so having somebody in the business who's putting this together to understand that, yeah, we're going to be dealing with people who may, have a vested interest in this working well. They may have a vested interest in feeling like this is, if this works well, I may have a job security issue. So understanding that ahead of time is pretty critically important. I kind of go back to the maintenance, just pick an illustratively, a maintenance guy. A lot of maintenance guys like to firefight. They like to run around all day and just fix things. So, making a maintenance technician understand what the benefit is going to be to predictive maintenance, you need to work through that, and you need to recognize that, as you explain this to somebody, that it's their motivations for this may be very different than the president of the companies. And so, working yourself down, almost following almost like an FMEA type of process is pretty critical to kind of recognize where all your potential pinch points are going to be trying to make this happen. But to Isaac's point, if we kind of start small, we're in a small area where a lot of people feel a lot of pain in a lot of different ways, you typically can get a good rally around it because you're not trying to solve world peace in the plant. You're just trying to fix this one machine with this one sensor, and everybody's kind of on board. So again, picking that, thinking big, but starting small in the right spot, you can kind of try to mitigate some of that pain early on.
Thank you for the insights around the people side.
I got to say, I mean, James is spot on. I think, I mean, how many plants have I walked into where they got the maintenance guy that's been there for 30 years? And I mean, he loves his job. I think sometimes it's almost a threat. They think that it's a threat that you're coming in there and trying to, solve all the maintenance problems and predict machine failure before they fail. And I mean, I can think of one specific example. Those guys can walk by a machine and hear it and know what the problem is. I mean, they've been there for 30 years. And I mean, I think in general in manufacturing, that's going to be an issue when those guys start retiring, especially in the US. We don't have a lot of guys to replace those guys. So, I mean, not only would this, kind of technology to be able to prevent maintenance issues be useful, and because of the lack of skills that we're going to have when these guys retire. But I do have to say that it is interesting as far as the people go. Not trying to make it not look like you're trying to replace their job, but enhance their job. And you would be surprised what you can do when you walk into a facility, and make sure you include those people in those meetings to get their insight and their input. That is a huge deal. And I talk about it like, it's like herding cats, because people in plants are really, really busy. And a lot of them are firefighting. But getting those people together in the same room and to have the discussions of what problems they can solve using the technology, getting those people in the room to have the discussion is probably the hardest part. I always say the technology is the easy part. It's getting people to sit down together and have those discussions together. And you'd be surprised what you can do by taking those people out for a beer after work. I can tell you multiple stories of getting people on board with projects and facilities and hearing great insights of what the problems are at the plant by just simply being people with each other, right? So I had to make that comment because, James mentioned maintenance guys, and there's one guy in every plant. There is definitely.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm raising my hand like in school. But great point, Isaac and James. You know, the other thing is this, when you look at our cost in MRO throughout all of our plants, when you have predictive maintenance, you don't have to have the inventory of MRO. Sometimes we have excessive parts just sitting there, and guess what? The machine doesn't go down for 2 years. Why did I spend $1,400 sitting on all those belts or all the whatever it is? The other thing is, when you've got predictive maintenance, when you know before a machine is going to go down, and you've got that connectivity within the body, within that facility and a company, and your customer, your inventory levels are lower as well. You no longer need to have that backup because you remove the element of surprise, and it's a bad surprise, and nobody wants a bad surprise. The other thing I want to mention is this. When a country can attack the world in a certain way, they can also attack the world with cyber issues for machinery and equipment. Look what Israel and I believe the United States did with Iran. What did we do with their equipment? We sent a software bug in there that delayed the enriching of plutonium to create nuclear weapons. Well, if someone can send a virus to the world and help their economy, they can certainly send a cyber attack. And if you look at the military fighter jets, they've got software and they've got sensors to prevent those things. Well, it's about time we treat our industrial sectors as a critical part of our economy and world, because you can see what happens when the economy suffers. It's unemployment. We don't want unemployment. Right. We were delighted when our unemployment was at 100-year lows and the fabric of society was working. This was a beautiful time, and it will come again. It will come again. I am very confident it will come again. But the cyber attacks, when you look at what the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence can do, it's preventative in many different ways.
Well, Chris, you make an excellent point, actually. You know, one of the challenges being faced right now is cybersecurity, and maybe I call upon you, Isaac, as an IT person. You know, how are you dealing with cybersecurity today to ensure the competitiveness of and the sustainment of your operation?
I'll tell a real quick story, just not to scare people, but I mean, it's a classic example of you know, putting an IoT device in without thinking about security. People probably have heard this story, but it's a classic story of a casino in Vegas that had a really nice saltwater fish tank. And they had the idea of, hey, listen, we can start monitoring that fish tank and, you know, all the levels of what needs to be, chemicals need to be in that water and temperature and such with the IoT device now. So they threw an IoT device in a fish tank. It seems completely, you know, harmless, right? To throw that into a fish tank. Well, it had no security on it, and someone, you know, discovered the device, hacked into the device, and was able to hack into the network and start stealing credit card information. So that is a perfect example of, you know, you think it's a completely harmless thing. You're going to monitor the fish tank really easily, and it turns into your company getting completely hacked. So yeah, just you know, that is a good thing just to think about. But the other part of this I want to talk about is, yeah, we make sure you're getting security, make sure you're paying attention to security. But the other thing I hear often as an IT person is the apprehension to use the cloud. And there are a lot of companies these days in manufacturing. It's become a pretty high trend of people getting hacked in their local companies with their local data centers, and then getting all of their data encrypted. And then the people will contact them and ask them, we're not unencrypting your data until you pay us money. So ransomware is a big problem in manufacturing these days. And so I've had conversations with people saying, hey, listen, going to the cloud, your local infrastructure generally is not going to have the type of security and monitoring that a company like Amazon or Microsoft is going to have. Yes, there is an inherent risk, but you're currently sitting on an inherent risk probably if you're not spending a ton of money on cybersecurity. So my thing is, don't be afraid. Yes, we need to be aware of it. We need to be making sure that we're being secure when we're putting IoT devices in. But technology is moving towards the cloud. It's moving towards IoT. The security will get better. It's always a constant battle. It's always going to be a battle between the people who are trying to hack and the people who are trying to secure. And we just need to be aware of it and hyper vigilant and making sure that we're doing the best we can with the security and not forget about it. Yeah, don't throw that sensor into a fish tank thinking that you got to think about security always.
Yeah, I mean, Isaac, it's public information. The biggest one recently of that was Honda. They got shut down for days globally. But a smaller, lesser known one that will remain nameless that Mo knows when I describe it, it's a stamping company. And they unfortunately went in the other direction. And they're losing advantages of technology because their IT group decided that this isn't worth the cybersecurity risk. So we're not going to be able to do all these things with our equipment. And it just strikes me as you're going in the wrong direction. To your point, where things are going toward the cloud, they're going toward collaboration, they're going toward these things to make you smarter, and shutting all that off is not a solution. If your IT group is telling you that that's the answer, at that point you can move them on. No offense to anybody who's on the call on this webinar from Montana, but you can go up to a corner of Montana and just live in a log cabin. I mean, you need to figure this thing out. You can't run away and hide from it.
Yeah, Bruce Smith at Detroit Manufacturing Systems used to say they're playing scared. Yeah, you never are successful if you're playing scared. I think you have to be careful and protect yourself, but you can't make decisions based on fear. Yeah.
Right.
And Chris, you had a comment on that?
I do. I'll give you one example. It's not automotive, but I gave my wife the black American Express Centurion card. It was stolen by a fella in New York. I was paying every month for 8 months, and I'm still paying. Do you know why I'm still paying, Isaac?
Why?
I'm paying because the guy's spending so much less than my wife. I'm delighted. Something else I wanted to bring up. The price of poker is a lot more expensive today. If you've got safety critical product in autonomous vehicles, and if something's going wrong and a few of those escape, if it's in the LiDAR system that's about to detect an object 250 meters ahead, and within 7 seconds you're going to hit that object, the price of poker is life critical right now.
Right.
How can you not use predictive maintenance to ensure the quality of your equipment, the quality of your product,
right,
and a risk of another person's life?
Yep.
So I just wanted to bring that up, Paul.
That's a very important comment, actually. Smart connected factories and smart connected products. So if I kick it up a notch and maybe ask James before we pose our concluding question, but some folks say that within an organization we should take all these things, the cybersecurity, the smart connectivity, the OEE, the business case, and form a central center of excellence, one organization that is responsible to make the decisions and disseminate it across the 29 Dura plans or the 30 plans that Maxion has. How do you feel about centralizing everything through a center of excellence that is responsible for Industry 4.0 in a company?
So that's a tricky question. And I'm going to be interested to hear what the other folks have to say. The concept of a center of excellence is great because, again, as you're learning, take this Dura 29 plant example, as you're learning, you want to centralize that knowledge so that people can understand it. You can develop training materials around it. You can deploy it. in some level of standardization out to the rest of the organization. So in that regard, centers of excellence, pilot areas that have an understanding of the technology are really strong. What you don't want to lose is something that Isaac brought up, which is taking the maintenance guy out for a beer. You know, there are things that are different at every facility with every piece of equipment that makes things a little different, that the center of excellence has sort of created the umbrella, but to become that mandated with a newer technology, you have to be really careful with that. You don't want to be, you want flexibility. So you don't want to have this inflexible center of excellence. So early on, we're talking about, again, starting small, acting fast, thinking big. At some point, as you scale this thing up, you've got to develop standards and methods and standard processes. And the center of excellence is probably, for larger organizations, is absolutely probably going to be the way to go. But I'd be
Isaac,
interested
maybe,
to hear what, I was going to be interested in what Isaac and Chris have to say.
Yeah, Isaac, you've created maybe centers of excellence, or you were part of a center of excellence at Maxion, 20 plants. Did it work out?
Yeah, I mean, James makes a really good point, because we had a lot of conversations similar to that, as far as, you know, you want to have governance, but you don't want to handcuff people, right? So there was a discussion of, should everybody be using the same type of sensor? And you know, the answer to that was no, because the protocols are the same. We don't want to handcuff people to have to use a particular vendor from a particular, if they can get it in their local country. But, you know, I was going to say too, not just for multiple plants, but just for you know, those people who just have one plant. In general, companies over the years have built silos, in department silos, or plant silos, or you know, those type of silos where they're generally working in those little areas and they're not sharing information. And that's an issue when it comes to Industry 4.0, because we talk about how it is really about communication and being able to connect and automate things. And you're not going to be able to automate things unless you inherently understand the entire process of your company, the entire process of what's going on and where the problems are and where we can fix those problems, and connecting those issues together using IoT devices or using data, or just using software in general. Yeah, so building a center of excellence is a big deal, because it's you got a cross-functional kind of organization that brings those people together in the same room to have those conversations. And you know, a plant might have an idea. You send it up to the organization that's dealing with digital transformation or Industry 4.0, and those discussions happen in that room. So yeah, so there's definitely a mix. You don't want to be, there's governance is important. You don't want some plant to go out and do an Industry 4.0 project that you're unaware of, and then start sending data to some cloud. And from an IT perspective, you find out about it later. They're sending data to some machine learning company that you're unaware of, and you know, you don't want that stuff to happen, but you also don't want to handcuff them. And so you want to, you know, breed in innovation, make sure you're kind of switching the culture of your company to not be such a siloed type company, more of a cross-functional company, and more of an innovative company.
Thanks for your feedback. So we have 5 minutes left on the clock, and I'd like to maybe do a go around, starting from James to Isaac to Chris. You know, simple question, gentlemen, and thank you for being with us today. And sorry we didn't address some of the questions that came through the chat, but we're gonna save them and we will answer them right after this. But what's next? You know, some say Industry 4.0 is a hype. Others are already talking about Industry 5.0, where there are people-oriented human-machine interfaces. And, you know, I'm not a big believer at the moment, because I'm still thinking everybody's transitioning from a 2.0 to a 3.0 to a 4.0. But long story short, maybe starting with James, I mean, what's next? What do you see 5 years from today, James? And then Isaac, and then Chris.
So I'm gonna I don't want to say go off the reservation, but I'm gonna give people a couple homework assignments. One is read up a little bit on a company called Divergent 3D. They have a different philosophy around manufacturing. And you can agree or disagree with Divergent 3D's approach. Similarly, you can read up on what Elon Musk has talked about with Tesla what he wants to do with manufacturing, and he talks about manufacturing density, and he talks about increasing manufacturing output by a factor of 20 for a vehicle assembly plant. Again, you can disagree or agree with the concept, but taking an assembly line that makes a car that moves at about 3.5 inches per second and changing it to 72 inches per second is a fundamental change. And this is these individuals and these companies are driving toward a different thought process when it comes to manufacturing that you can only do with the tool sets that are now becoming available through Industry 4.0 or the subset, which is IoT. And so I see that drive and that thought process filtering down through the tiers, and you're going to begin to see how do they support that fundamental change. And you're going to start to see things that come up that maybe, more micro factories that are much more flexible and nimble. They're going to become much more prevalent in the next 5 years. You're going to see more generic capacity. People talk about server farms today, right? That's a totally normal thing for people to say. Well, what about instead of a server farm, we have a 3D printing farm or an assembly farm or a CNC farm? Those things may very well come about to support kind of the manufacturing that's required. So the technology that's coming into play can really create a very different marketplace from how manufacturing gets done. And to me, you're not going to see that in 5 years. You're not going to see a CNC manufacturing farm in 5 years. But the building blocks are getting put in place for something like that. It's going to democratize really manufacturing because product design can just get deployed down and you can do basically manufacturing as a service. So I see that kind of idea coming. I see the technology in place to do that. And, so that's going to be a new competitive threat to the traditional, I make this particular widget, out of a plastic injection molding machine and ship it to my customer. So I see a little bit of that going on. So maybe it's a little further out than 5 years, but I think you're going to get line of sight to it here in the next few years.
Isaac, you put your IT hat on. What's next in the next 5 years?
Yeah, there's what they call the hype cycle of emerging technologies, and I think that hype cycle goes through some excitement and then a peak of inflated expectations. And I think we've gone over the peak of inflated expectations of what Industry 4.0 is, and then I think some people are in what they call the trough of disillusionment. So I think some people are in there right now, but this is real, and that's my message. I have seen it happen. I've had success, especially with predictive maintenance and also predictive quality. I've seen it work, so it's real. It's not something that's going to go away. So there'll be kind of some enlightenment, I think, and then people, like companies, like I said, companies that I've been affiliated with and worked with, have some very old machines, and we're going to be able to hook more and more machines up. The IoT devices that are out there are just going to escalate, and we're going to see more and more success stories coming out of this in the next 5 years.
Chris, the next 5 years and any parting advice to the audience?
James, I think, brought up such a salient point. I'm an Elon Musk fan. He's not afraid to take a chance. And when you look at what he's doing with speeding the line rates up and shrinking the size of these plants and being more efficient, there is talk that by 2030, 2035, Tesla could have 20% of the world market, simply because of the risks he's taking to enhance quality, to increase efficiency, and that's what Internet of Things is doing and artificial intelligence is doing. So I look at it more geopolitically. The real battle is economics, guys. I mean, it's not really military as it used to be. You still have good people, you got bad people. I would just love everybody to get along. But the bottom line is, if the United States does not have a good economy, if our government has to go back to just giving people money for not working, failure is on the way. And so I like the businessman mind and approach to helping people create jobs, because jobs is self-esteem, and that's what we need. And it's job enrichment when you're working in a company that has the latest technology. And Isaac's absolutely right. Go out for a beer, know your people. But people would rather work in a company that they're proud of. They'd rather work in a company that's not old and archaic. Oh, the damn machine went down again. No, they'd rather work where everything is a fine-tuned operation and the company's growing. Because if it's not, what's the alternative? The alternative, the group in Germany, they'll have predictive maintenance. In Japan, predictive maintenance. They will have it. And our competition is global. So America has to continue to improve constantly. And I think that's what you're offering, Mo. In fact, when we first met, Mo, my gosh, I said, you're leaps ahead of everybody else. We need to do that in companies I own. Because what do I do with my money? I give it away. And I'm happy to be able to give it away. Or I buy new companies and create more jobs. So, no, thank you for allowing me to participate. I really appreciate, James, I really enjoyed hearing your comments. Isaac, really enjoyed hearing your comments, things that I hadn't known before. So I'm really appreciative and humbled to be requested to join. Thanks, Mo.
No, and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to have you here today. I'm very grateful to be acquainted with each one of the people on the call today. Thank you very much, James, for sharing your experience. Thank you, Isaac, for being here. Thank you, Chris Charlton, for taking the time. I want to thank all the audience. I want to thank Courtney and the Digital Enterprise Society. We've recorded the session, and if you want to conclude the session, Courtney, thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you all for being panelists today. We really do appreciate it. Just for all of our attendees, a recording, as Mo said, will be up on the website shortly. Should have it up by tomorrow afternoon. I know a lot of people had sent in questions through the chat, and maybe we didn't get to all of them, and that's we'll work on getting you those answers. I will work with the panelists to get some of those questions answered, and I'll put something out and send it out to everyone as well. Just wanted to let Chris know, John says, great view on the challenges we face, huzzah. So, and many thanks to all of you and all of our panelists that are coming through in the chat, so very good. Again, my name is Courtney McWhorter. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager with Digital Enterprise Society. If you have any questions about our organization or getting involved or becoming a member, I'm happy to help. Once again, Digital Enterprise Society is a new nonprofit association organized to enable the transformation of product development, design, delivery, and maintenance throughout the digital enterprise, regardless of your software tools used. We are dedicated to the manufacturing enterprise workforce, and I thank you all for being here today. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org to learn more. Have a great one. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.